All right, Quintin, here we go. I believe this is episode 26 of the Nervous System Training Podcast. Maybe 27. I got to double check. But thanks everyone who's been watching. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. Helps us out a lot. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into Probodx, which was kind of part of the original Marinovich system. I'll let you kind of fill in a little more context on that. But we've got a video that's a retro video going back to the OG Probiotics concept. So we'll talk about that and then talk about how it's used in the Marinovich system and all that. But yeah, can you fill in a little more context? Edith Hues is the author of that book, Probiotics. And I know she worked with Marv back in the day.
Yeah, so Probodx was published, I think, in 2002 or 2001. I actually have a copy
Oh, sweet.
right here that I was kind of looking through doing like a little research. Believe it was 2003 this was published, and it was co-authored by Dr. Edith and Marv Marinovich. And as far as I know, with the background of it, is Marv was really big into like the Soviet Union style methodology of training. You know, there's a couple guys like him, like Louis Simmons, who was trying to pay attention to those training methods. Jay Schroeder and Marv Marinovich, those guys I would consider like the big advocators, and that really took those principles and started to evolve them. And Dr. Edith was really big into like Pilates, and I think she's a chiropractor by trade. And I had a couple phone calls with her, and she sort of like innately developed this process with foot strengthening methodology, with the balance pipes, and with the ball work training program. Utilizing the water hand weights, which is a huge layer of the current nervous system training program. I actually think it might be the most significant layer, even more than just the Soviet training methodology alone, is what Dr. Edith kind of came up with. And this is where her ideas, when she was developing at the time and when they were collaborating, they didn't really exactly understand what they were doing. Marv even said in the video, like, we don't exactly have the language to depict the type of qualities we're developing to these athletes. Well, the language that they was looking for was fascial mechanics, and elasticity, all these things that improve soft quality. And so when we dive into this video, we're going to kind of see some of their early collaborations. Marv was training in his pole barn garage at the time, and this was right after he started working with the Supercats, when Marv Marinovich was working with this guy named the Dunk Master, who introduced like these isokinetic machines and these Supercats. So I can kind of, yeah, maybe we could probably start playing the video to kind of give the audience like a little bit of a visual context of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I'm actually going to switch my tab real quick, but real quick, for a little more context, I like how you use that term layers for the layers of the nervous system training. You call this one of the layers. I'm curious, what are the other layers? And you said this is kind of the biggest layer in your opinion, or potentially the biggest layer, but what are the other layers, and just how does it all, where does this fit into the larger Marinovich training, nervous system training umbrella?
So like I would say all the layers, like you have like the foot strengthening. That's like one. Let's say that's one what's the word I'm looking for? One area, I guess, of the training is developing and strengthening of the feet. That improves like reaction time, fast twitch, injury resistance, overall coordination and accuracy of kinesthetic awareness. Then you have the ball work training methodology, which develops the elasticity, hydration of the fascial system, enhances kinesthetic awareness, makes movement a lot smoother and more reactive, like smooth as slow as smooth and smooth as fast. And that's responsible for really enhancing a lot of soft qualities. Then the other layer is you have like the speed and agility training, which a lot of this stuff Marv kind of like pioneered and developed into the NFL, but he took it to a much further system with like the hurdle work. Learning proper leg mechanics, speed and agility mechanics, reactive speed and agility, lateral movement, jumping mechanics. And then you have kind of like I guess SAQ is like a layer that can encompass everything like speed, agility, and quickness. Then you have the plyometric layer, which is what he really used with the Soviets. And he supplemented more plyometric stimulus with the supercat training. You can see Mark has the supercats in the background of his pole barn, and the isokinetic machines, very, very early versions of the ISO machines. I think they're called the kangaroo jumper, the kangaroo leaper. They're like really old school ones from the 80s that Dunkmaster introduced into and he incorporated into the program. So those are like the main layers. And in this video, this is a video, I think you can buy this DVD at Jump USA. Jump USA is kind of like a weird website that probably people who get into the nervous system training rabbit hole kind of stumble across. It's like a website that hasn't been updated in like 20 years. They have like a lot of old school like Marv Marinovich stuff. They used to sell hand weights at the time. They have jump soles. I don't know who owns it, but they have somewhere along the lines, Marv Marinovich and Jump USA had some sort of collaboration. A lot of his early products are still found on that website. And yeah, this is where Todd Marinovich claims that Marv really started taking his training to the next level. His dad's program really turned into what he called the good stuff. And this is when he started working with Hagar, started working with Troy Polamalu with this complete version. I would not say complete, but the most updated version of Marinovich's idea of athletic training. Balance, ball work, plyometrics, SAQ, all kind of like came together, in this sort of system. And right now, the way the system is kind of structured, it's been slightly updated, but this seems to deliver the fastest, most noticeable results in the shortest amount of time for the athlete when you kind of like wrap all these layers together.
And so when it actually comes to the practice of doing this ball work, what does that look like for you? What do you do with most of your athletes? We'll use MMA athletes just as a core example, but how does this fit into the training program? How do you know which movements to emphasize within the training program? What are you looking for?
So when I'm working with an athlete, and when it comes to how to implement the ball work training, is first, you got to run their athletic assessment if you can, to figure out where their weak points are. And usually the first stage, like the ball work kind of acts as like a general preparation stage. It's like the main foundation for your GPP is the balance training, re-strengthening the athlete's feet, improving their proprioceptive qualities, and getting them on the ball work training methodology. And those two, just in the first phase of the training, has huge improvements on the athlete's ability to move, coordinate their body, feel more elastic, reduction of chronic pain, reducing the amount of muscle compensators into their body. Now, this version of the ball work is really, really early stuff. If you look at it now, it's gotten a lot faster. It's gotten a lot more coordinated. The movements have become what I call more global, where they're like bigger ballistic movements to hit more layers of the tissue to push more qualities into the body. But yeah, this is it's pretty remarkable, because usually when you bring them through the balance training, that strengthens the feet, that redevelops their foundation, so they're moving better. Their body is under less stress and tension throughout training because their feet are stronger. The distribution of kinetic energy is a lot easier. The nervous system is less taxed. And like, here's like a kind of like a reference of how much the feet really affect the body. Like, have you ever worked like a long shift, like an 8-10 hour shift at whatever job? And when you first come home, what's the first thing you want to do?
Take your shoes off.
You want to take your shoes off. You want to get that pressure off the nervous system. When you take your shoes off, you get this huge sense of relief in your body. Like you can, because your feet expel a tremendous amount of heat. They control a lot of your circulation. That's why compartment syndrome is a thing. Like, you really want to try to get the restriction off the feet. And that does a lot for the nervous system. And then you want to get them into the ball work training simultaneously. This is going to give them the elasticity, and it's going to get the fascial system and the nervous system to start communicating with your limbs and with your secondary and primary muscle groups, so the body starts working as one unit instead of training it in all these fragmented sections, say like traditional weightlifting will have. And yeah, what you want to do early in the stage is you just want to work them with this foot strengthening and ball work training as much as possible. Like usually the first 2 weeks, they're just doing balance and ball work. Usually the first 2 weeks. We'll do some things like we'll add in a little SAQ, if we got time, depending on the training session, depending on the goal, the context of what they're looking for. But this is going to enhance their movement. It's going to have a very synergistic effect when you start moving them into like more intense speed and agility and plyometric training. Followed up with like the isometric training methodology with the super cats, the plyometric throws with the super cats. Like the results are just phenomenal. Like I would say 4 weeks, you'll start noticing the athletes' significant improvements in their vertical jump, their broad jump, their movement quality, how they feel inside their own skin starts to really improve. The restriction and tightening and chronic irritability that some muscle groups may be holding because of lack of stimulation, lack of strength, lack of mobility, all that starts going away just by working this ball work training.
Interesting. I'm curious, like you're referencing the rate of development, or we could call
rate
it
of
that.
Force development,
or no, just the rate of athletic development, the rate of movement development, and you're talking about how starting an athlete who hasn't done this Marinovich training with the ball work and with foot training yields the highest rate of development from the get-go. I'm curious, why do you think that the rate of development is the highest with those types of movements to start, and then does that taper off? Like, I'm just curious why you mentioned that a couple times. Why it stands out.
Yeah, well, because there's two things in life that like speed, and that's results and money. If you can get money really fast, you'll catch people's attention. If you can get results with your body really fast, that'll catch people's attention. Like we really gravitate the value of speed with those two things, because those two things are usually very difficult to acquire, right? Transforming your body, most people are used to the paradigm that it's going to take months and months and months, not days. So that's, I always emphasize neurological adaptations happen really fast. Those is where your soft qualities. So that's what's going to get you points on the board. That's what's going to get you more playing time. That's going to get you being able to shoot the ball more accurately, or improve your hitting percentage. So I always like to emphasize that to kind of help break the paradigm where athletes usually think that, hey, I got to work on this for maybe 2 to 3 months to notice a little bit of improvement in the next season. When you can literally start doing this ball work and balance training in season and start improving your skill work exponentially without having to do more reps in the batting cage or do more rounds on the heavy bag. And that's probably a huge paradigm shifter that a lot of athletes go through when they start doing this training. That, in my opinion, is the biggest game changer when it comes to other training systems and this training system. Can you do something in a matter of days so you're better for Friday night, so you're better for Saturday night, and you just started this Monday afternoon?
And then that you kind of touched on it. My next question was, how does this type of training affect your body, like in season or in competition mode? I know what it feels like to go do squats and then have a game the next day or a couple days after, but how does this affect it? I know what the muscular system feels like. What does the neurological system feel like?
Well, you just feel like you need less recovery time. And so the biggest issue that happens with athletes in season is they start developing wear and tear as the season goes on, and they also start developing strength reduction. Because you're dealing with the demands of your sport, especially if it's a really hard contact sport like football or something like that, or soccer, which has a lot of impact onto the body. athletes usually start getting injured more and more as the season goes on. You know, especially from repetitive skill work movement, maybe like hitting a baseball or throwing a baseball over and over again. And so when you do this sort of training, one, it keeps the fluid pumping properly into all these different tendon systems, fascial systems, which feels very good onto the body. That's why when you do certain things like when you do say like a yoga session, that maybe isn't just stretching, maybe there's some holds and stuff going into it. Your joints usually feel better because of the blood flow. Like the fluid system, the hydration system is starting to enhance. That can really, really help the body. And what was the second part of the question? I lost my track of thought.
Oh, I can't even remember either.
Something about we were talking about in season, why it's so beneficial in season.
Yeah, so like how does your body, like if you did this on a Tuesday and you had a game on a Wednesday, are you going to be wrecked?
No, well, it depends. It depends on how much you've done it. Maybe if it was your first session, maybe you'll feel sore, maybe not. Um, and and soreness doesn't really affect performance that much. It's literally just a nervous system signal that shuts off with adrenaline. So no, you can do this in season. We don't, we're not tearing down the tissue with this type of training, like say heavy weightlifting systems will kind of implement. So some people are so used to this idea that we have to do like training, then recovery, then training, then recovery, in that order. But with doing the ball work training, it's very easy on the body. You don't need to take like a few days off to help to allow this tissue breakdown to start to regenerate. And you're just and a lot of these movements are hard. They don't look difficult, but when you do them, this puts your nervous system. This really stresses your nervous system out, and it gets also a lot of strength and conditioning in season is mostly based on trying to enhance primary muscle activation. When you do the ball work training methodology and the balance, that's going to primarily enhance secondary muscle activation. And when you're in sport, like when you're running, jumping, when you're cutting, spinning, a lot of that is tendon and secondary muscle activation that's really giving you those type of movement qualities. Not so much the primaries. The primaries is more like a big stabilizer to hold everything in place, but the way your limbs move, the way you abduct, the way you backpedal and then stop and then charge forward again, a lot of that's your secondary muscle system, your stabilizing muscles. And this sort of training really enhances those and strengthens those and keeps those active. And also that really, really does help you with injury resistance.
I've noticed myself as I've started getting into this, a lot of these movements, especially when you get faster, they're kind of rhythm exercises where you kind of find the rhythm and you can keep it, you can speed it up, slow it down, but you need that rhythm to maintain the consistent flow. To me, that's what makes it unique. And there's all these stabilizing factors that you're talking about as well. I'm curious, to your knowledge, is there any other people that are using Swiss balls for this type of training? I don't even know what they're originally meant for, but like, are there any other lineages of training systems, to your knowledge, that have anything along the same lines of movement here?
Yeah, I would say Russian gymnastics. You would use these stability balls a lot, or like a lot of gymnastics in Eurasia, China, Russia. They would kind of utilize a lot of these tools. Um, Pilates really utilizes stability balls. I would say if the ball work was influenced from something, I think it was really influenced from the Pilates system personally. Because you look at some of the movements in Pilates, especially like the leg movements where they're sitting on the platform, the legs are on these like cables and they're pulling against these cables, doing these different leg swings. It's very similar to the movement patterns you see in the ball work training. That's where I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that really helped inspire Dr. Edythe on her development of the system. But some of these movements were kind of developed and refined with Marv. Like Marv developed the crossovers and a couple other upper body movements. So not all of this was 100% Dr. Edythe, but she did develop the principles.
Okay.
So if you look at it, if you look at this guy doing all these different hand weight movements, those hand weights are filled with water. And because you're using a proprioceptive element like the stability ball, so you're leveraged against something that pushes proprioceptive quality. It also allows like the scaps, the shoulder blades to move more freely. They're not being pinned against like a solid surface like a workout bench. And when you do these movements, it's very eccentric dominant. So when you swing these hand weights around, they're filled with water. That means the downwards force is going to be harder because of the inertia of the water. It's called hydroinertial training. And that's why you see a lot of guys, like especially in baseball, they're really big into like the water weights. They have like the water bags and stuff like that because hydroinertial training is the way you can push eccentric overload and stretch shortening cycle activation into the tissue without impact. So you're essentially taking the plyometric principle, which is eccentric overload, activation, and stretch shortening cycle, to absorb and recoil kinetic energy back to the source it came from. Now with this ball work training, maybe you add ankle weights, but these movements, they force that same lengthening, that lengthening process and snapping process to all the muscle groups, which with Soviet plyometrics, it mostly hits the legs and the upper body, torso, arms, and limbs. They kind of get sort of that feedback secondary, but it mostly hits the legs first. But now we can plyometrically train every single part of the body, hit all these different myofascial lines. We can do all these different types of movements and really start developing higher qualities of elasticity. So essentially, this is technically, if you want to be really, really specific, ball work training is plyometric training for the entire body. Yeah.
That's a cool
Just
way to
like you
think about
saw,
it.
what was it?
That's a cool way to think about it. I never put it in that framework before.
Yeah, because the only thing that makes something plyometric is eccentric overload at speed. That's it. That's the main principle to Soviet plyometric training. Like that's what a box jump is. Like you stand on the box, you hit the ground, eccentric overload, snap it back up, you jump with the recoil. That's plyometrics by definition. That's the principle. Overload of eccentric forces for stretch shortening cycle. And you can see we're doing it with the guy's adductors, you're doing it with the ankle weights. Now, these are the kickbacks. This guy's got to brush up on his technique a little bit. But whenever this guy's leg returns to the ball, it has that impact. The supporting leg that's on the ball, when it bounces, that's a huge amount of eccentric energy that's hitting the hamstring. Now, this guy has to do it, like his technique needs to kind of improve a little bit. But when it's done right and you work these movements, you really feel that eccentric shock hitting those hamstrings, and you're starting to plyometrically train all different areas of the body in a very safe way. So instead of finding a field and doing like straight-legged marches and high knees and stuff like that, you can just do this ball work training. Get more strength quality out of it, get more kinesthetic awareness without the impact. Because when you got to do these drills, like your knees have to be ready, your muscles have to be stretched. With this, everything gets a ballistic stretch and a strengthening quality all at the same time. One leg is getting extension, so it's really extending the quality of the hamstring, while the other leg on the ball is putting lots of pressure into the ball, and he's training the strength and awareness of his internal external rotators in his opposite leg. And those areas are really difficult to hit with other modalities. Using like elastic bands, you got to lay on your stomach, right? You got to internally, externally rotate. With this, you can train it at an even higher level, and a lot of people have no idea how demanding some of these movements are. Some of these movements are freaking tough, like the pendulum swings. You'll be sweating your ass off trying to learn this movement.
Yeah, I like that one. It's 3 taps on the internal rotation side, 1 tap on the external. But I always struggle with the internal rotation more. So that one was way harder to me than just 1 tap on each side. It's interesting. A lot of the trainers that I've kind of come to follow, there's Edith Hues here. I like Eric Goodman, the foundation training. We've talked about that in a previous episode. Kelly Starlett, the supple leopard. Kelly Starlett was Pilates. Eric Goodman was chiropractor. But a lot of these trainers, they're Pilates people, chiropractors that kind of go off and create their own systems. It's interesting. I think the they have this Western education which gives them the concepts, but it's the ones who kind of go and create something that those are the ones that have been really interesting to me.
Well, that's because a lot of them actually get to use their imagination. When you get away from the CSCS model and you start exploring things like yoga, Pilates, uh, uh, like even in chiropractic, you kind of get a deeper understanding of how the body is, or even physical therapy. Physical therapy really opened my eyes to what training stimulus is, what even quantifies, or what even is a modality. Like what qualifies a movement to become an exercise modality. If you look at physical therapy, there's thousands of protocols, thousands of different movements, hundreds of movements just for the same issue. And after a while, you start noticing, like, okay, if all these different movements are working, if Pilates is helping and physical therapy is helping and yoga is helping, like what are the common principles between all of them? Well, they're in a biomechanically sound position. They're using a movement quality that is at a tempo, whether that's very slow or very fast, to produce a certain type of stimulus out of the body that's not counterproductive to the biomechanics. Like you're not twisting your knee in a weird way and loading it, which maybe the ACL can't take, or the hip socket can't take, right? So it's got to be biomechanically sound. Apply a loading or an activation tempo to it, whether that's going to be an explosive hip bridge, a slow eccentric hip bridge, maybe a hip bridge that you just hold, right? These are all different tempos, and they're all producing a different type of stimulation quality to the muscle tissue depending on what you need. So if you start understanding these principles, and when you start looking at exercises, that's when you can really start to figure out what the body really is stimulating towards. Now, when it comes to, like, say, the ball work training compared to, say, Pilates or yoga, the ball work training is working on a higher demand on the nervous system because there's more proprioceptive elements. So under the context that it's going to enhance your movement quality for speed, doing it this way is going to give you the most mechanical benefit. It's going to give you the most soft quality improvements because you're hitting the body with a certain amount of physics that you're asking for the sport. So that's why doing yoga and then soccer isn't going to give you the same results as doing ball work and soccer. It's because the stimulation demand isn't quite the same. So this is why personally, when I see some of these guys kind of like work these other systems, they're trying to work in yoga, they're trying to work in Pilates, which is great. It's going to help, but it's not going to come close. Like you need for sports movements, you need a certain amount of physical demand and types of physical principles to hit the body with in order to get those qualities to come out. Anything less, you're going to have reduction in qualities.
Yeah, I've been calling the common thread with all these systems alignment. I like your term, biomechanically sound. I think that's more accurate. But yeah, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It has to be specific for your sport. So biomechanically sound and sport specific in terms of speed and intensity.
Mm-hmm. And you could also do the ball work really slow. That's another thing that I've kind of learned over the years. Like same idea. This is the same methodology of thinking that a lot of you guys, a lot of you coaches watching, especially some of you newer guys, you have to start looking at training this way. When you look at the ball work, it can be done insanely fast. Like if you look at Power Plus, his ball work is at a super high tempo, like very fast and violent. That's his trademark term, is violence with your training. But if you're working with someone like, say, who's a little bit more injured, maybe they're into fitness, their goal isn't like a lot of speed and velocity, you can literally do these ball work movements really, really slow, like in slow motion. And that will have more of a therapeutic effect on the body. That can improve overall fitness quality, it can improve compensating muscles, it can improve like more neurological strength. Maybe if you have like your QL's not firing properly and your glute medius isn't firing properly, you can do some of these movements really slow, to help activate some of these secondaries and restore a lot of a lot of areas that are reducing strength, that are creating kinetic compensation, which can lead to agitation or wear and tear over time. So you can literally take the same methodology but slow it down. It's more therapy and fitness based. Speed it up, it's more sports performance based. So that's telling you that tempo and stimulation is really the difference maker when it comes to all of these different systems. So when I see these systems, like when I see like Pilates or I see like functional patterns, really what I'm looking at is I'm not really worried about the movement, right? Movements are movement. You can make up so many different movements over time, as long as you know like what hip extension is, what internal external rotation is, what late abduction adduction is, right? But if I'm looking at the tempo of the movement, like, okay, it's going at this speed, which means we're looking for these types of qualities. If it's going slower, if we're going at this speed, okay, we're going to get these types of qualities. And so I can literally take physical therapy movements or Pilates movements. I can look at them and be like, okay, can I make this faster? Yes, I can make it faster. Can I load it up a little bit more and still keep it fast? Yes. Boom. Now I have a new modality. Now I can take a slow movement, make it fast, and now it's a sports movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I like that the spectrum from recovery to performance, with tempo being the unit along the axis.
Yeah, we'll pull up the force velocity curve. So this is your if you're a trainer, this is your main point of reference, right? This is like your stairway to heaven, is this force velocity curve. And you pull it up, is that you have all these different forms of velocity and they're all labeled differently. And then you have like how fast the movement goes. So further you go down the curve, the movements are going faster, the load's going lighter. The more you go up the curve, the speed goes down and the load goes up. So looking at this is like how you can understand tempo, how you understand the speed of what your movement is. So now you can take that, but you can go slower up the curve, but without the load exceeding. You don't have to increase the load. This is just kind of like a guideline for you. So you can do like the push-up, right? You can go really high up the curve and do an isometric push-up. And maybe you load it, maybe you don't load it, depending on how much the athlete can take. And then you go further down the curve, and then you're doing fast push-ups, right? Push-ups as fast as you can. You go even further down the curve, now you're doing push-ups where you're leaving the ground. Then you go even further down the curve, now you're doing push-ups where like you launch the ground, as soon as your hands hit, you launch back up, so you don't go into a deep flexion with your push-up. Same movement, same biomechanically sound modality, different tempos for a different result.
I have a small ball. It's like, I don't even know what it is, maybe 24-inch or something like that. It's about as small as the Swiss balls come. It's just the one in my house, but I've been doing push-ups on it, and it's a little shorter than my chest height when I'm in a straight arm plank. So it allows me to do push-ups really fast. It's pretty fun, actually.
I used to get some like recoilability with it.
Yeah, and I can do 50 in like 20 seconds, but I'm cooked.
Yeah. So now you're you're starting to experience like what the Super Cat kind of offers.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, and this is you're probably going down the same road that Marv Marinovich and Dr. Edith were going down. Like where you start to soften the load, but start to increase the tempo of the movement. So, and here's where the Supercat kind of got introduced, and also why the ball work is so beneficial, because certain movements like a plyometric push-up, right? You can only do so many of those in like one set. You maybe get like 8 to 20 reps, right? If you can hit 20, you're pretty strong. Like that's a lot of force. It's a lot of force endurance you have. But the impact and the load of your own body weight can be a lot, and that can cap you off. Maybe you can only get 2 to 3 sets in one exercise in one training session. Then you got to switch to a different set of muscle groups. And if you like look at the compound effects, say you can only do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can only get 10 reps at a good peak set, right? So you do 2 sets of that on Monday, 2 sets of that on Wednesday, 2 sets of that on Friday. So that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. That's 60 repetitions throughout the week. Okay, that's pretty good. That'll create some adaptation. But if you can add the ball work, which is very low impact, same stretch shortening cycle activation. So you do like the crossovers. Now you're throwing more plyometric stimulation into the chest on top of the plyometric push-ups. And then say you start doing the super cat throws. The super cat, because it's lower impact, but it is high enough to give you like a stretch shortening cycle activation. Now you can hit like maybe 60 types of stretch shortening cycle activation in a training session instead of just 20. So now you're at 60, 120. Like you can keep climbing that higher and higher throughout the week. So now you're going to adapt faster. So that's why the ball work super cat plyometrics adds like an even higher level than just kinesthetic plyometrics, because kinesthetic, it has its limits. With this, you can really expand the training capacity. You can expand the limits of how much stimulation you can hit the athlete with.
And so we talked at the beginning of the conversation, kind of the initial introduction to footwork, ball work, and the rate of adaptation with those. I'm curious, for advanced athletes who've been doing this, well-developed ball work athletes, what does it look like? Like for you, for instance, for other, maybe Nick Curson or some of these other guys that that may have been doing this for a long time. How do you fit this into your routine once your body has a good feel for it? What do you focus on? How often do you do it? That kind of stuff.
What's the goal? Like just everyday fitness? I sent you another video of the Probodx stuff in case you want to replay that more.
I'll pull that up.
But like, what's the goal? Is this just regular fitness? Are we still trying to improve performance? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, let's just say competition focused.
Okay.
Yeah, so well developed ball work athlete, someone with a lot of experience, multiple years. What does their training look like with the ball work? Is it still something that's emphasized? Does it once you're up to speed on that and the footwork, the emphasis go down and other things come more to the forefront? How does that look?
I don't really think so. I feel like you can never do enough ball work, to be honest. Like I think ball work is like when I ran my training sessions in person, we were doing ball work every training session. Maybe it becomes a little bit more isolated because they're so good at the movements. You do get adapted to it. Like your first couple training sessions are really difficult. It's really hard on the body. You're sweating your ass off. You can't quite figure it out. But then once you're like 3 months in, 4 months in, it starts to become easy where you can bang out the whole lower body ball work in like 15 minutes. So I usually use that as their warm up at a certain point. Like it kind of bell curves. Like it's very steep, it's very difficult, but then after a while, they kind of figure it out. Their body peaks to it. And then they get a little bit less and less stimulation out of it because they're becoming so well adapted. Now, you can try to increase that bell curve by adding ankle weights, increasing the load of the water. But after they're like well conditioned into the nervous system training, they're probably going to do their balance. Like say it's a lower body day. Like our primary thing is we're trying to focus on say forward explosiveness, like a broad jump, right? That's being able to jump forward instead of jumping up like a vertical jump. We'll do something like we'll work the balance, whatever modalities. And then we'll start doing like, I'll work in a little bit of hip bridges, get some muscle activation. And then we'll go into like, say, kickbacks, kickbacks with the ball work training. So we'll work like 3 or 4 modalities out of the ball work. Try to get as much elastic energy and stimulation into the areas, into like the legs that we're going to be hitting with plyometrics later. And then we'll do some SAQ stuff that'll either be a part of improving, say, this goal, like broad jump base goal, or maybe if they're a soccer player, we're going to work more lateral movement. It's really context dependent, but I usually work in some SAQ. And then we'll go into our plyometric strength. But the ball work basically acts like a warm-up. We're like, so like I said, instead of doing like the traditional warm-up where you do like dynamic stretches and high knees and butt kickers and all that shit, just do this ball work training. You get more stimulation, better quality of mechanics, You get ballistic stretching and strengthening all at the same time. So now you're really saving on time efficiency. Say like doing like your traditional warm up field work, which everyone does. So maybe they'll do like a cardio machine. They'll do their dynamic footwork, like they'll do their karaoke shuffle, they do their butt kickers, do their high knees, do their like whatever these are called, where they kind of like march like a bunch of soldiers, right? That still doesn't hit everything very well. It's not enough stimulus to hit like the glute medius very well. Maybe the hamstring doesn't get quite as much work as it needs. Say if you got a soleus that's not working good, using the ball work, you can really hit these other stabilizers a lot deeper than just doing dynamic footwork on the field. So it just becomes better. It's just a better alternative, better return on investment, better efficiency of training session. It keeps the body nice and loose and elastic and hydrated. So the plyometric training really feeds into it. Everything in this nervous system training has a feedback loop. Like balance enhances athletic SAQ. The ball work training enhances speed and agility. The speed and agility gets enhanced with the plyometrics. Like everything kind of feeds into each other. If you take away one of them, you're gonna notice the athlete's gonna start lacking in their movement. So you wanna keep the ball work training in. You want to keep all of it in as much as possible. You don't really abandon anything. You just find new ways to progress it. And then Brian McGinty's actually taken it further to progress his ball work. Say if they're well adapted to it, they can knock out the ball work no problem. Okay, now we can make it reactive. Where now they can do like pendulum swings, and then they only have to do the right side. Then they have to do just the left side. They have to do short ones and big ones, right? Where they got to kind of like react on the fly. And then they have to call out like they can hold up different colored balls. Like I saw Brian, he would have like two coaches, one with an orange, one with a blue, and they would hold it up. And the athlete have to see it and call out the color while he's reacting to the different call outs for the ball work. So you can really, really add more layers on it to challenge the athlete. So there's never a plateau really.
Would you do ball work before a game if you're, let's say, a field sport athlete, before a soccer game or baseball game or something?
That's a really good question. Now, when I was talking to Ram, Ram is Mar's good friend. Ram was working on a system, and I believe he had data. He was really going off about this, how getting athletes to do their balance training and ball work training right before hitting practice or baseball practice was having huge improvements for the athlete, like huge. No, I've never tried it because I've never had the situation to do it. I've never worked with a team where I could take all the equipment out to the field, we do all our ball work and shit right then and there, and they go. I have worked with other athletes, like this one soccer player that I was working with for like 4 years. She would do her nervous system training, and then an hour later she'd go do her soccer practice. Just fine. So I believe it would have a huge positive effect. Now, could it be a little difficult for the athletes, say it's their first couple days doing the ball work and then they go to practice and they feel a little zapped? Yeah, but you'll adapt. It's not going to push, it's not going to crash your central nervous system so much where it could lead to an injury, if it's programmed properly. So yeah, I have, my gut is telling me doing the balance and the ball work, even moments before practice, is going to have huge benefit. And if you kind of think about it, most athletes are already doing these soft quality tool modalities before practice anyway. Like you see guys, like you go to an MLB game, you see guys in the bullpen, like, they're doing this with bands. They're throwing the drive line ball, right? They have like their little water bag, right? And they're like doing like movements with it, right? They're trying to get their bodies warm. They're trying to get these muscle activation going. WEC method, you see the WEC method club, you see like guys would start like swinging that like right before they're hitting. They're trying to get their nervous system to prime up these movers. They're about to go into velocity. So if it's already kind of being applied, but just with different protocols, different tools, like Occam's razor, yeah, I think it definitely is gonna work. I think it's gonna work even better than what's currently going on now.
But what if we think about it this way? Where on this curve would you suggest training at with ball work before game, And then separately in a training session where you're emphasizing ball work and focusing on it, I guess that would probably be maximum velocity. And then the recovery pace that you've mentioned.
Hold on. Let's go one at a time. What's the first part of the question?
Okay. So breaking down ball work into different points on this curve. We've talked about the recovery pace, kind of the relieving tension pace, the slower ball work that we see a lot in this video. Where would you estimate that is on this curve? Then where would it be the before pre-game pace?
Okay, slower ball work. So why would the athlete be doing the ball work slower?
We've talked about it a little bit. Like the advantage of doing it is to I forget the exact terminology used, but to alleviate tension. Let's say you've got the recovery pace. You find a tight spot. You want to loosen that up. You're doing it slow, trying to work through something.
No. You wouldn't do it slow. You would do things slow if maybe you have like a serious weakness in an area that you want to develop more strength, or you need some sort of physical therapy quality into it. If you're feeling kind of tight, you need to loosen up. You want to do your ball work fast before your game. You want to start priming the tissue to start stretching and snapping, more. So if you were to do ball work under this context, you were to do ball work before like a performance. Technically, ball work at velocity is somewhere between I can't read those bottom. It's somewhere between speed, strength, and speed at the bottom of the force velocity curve. Okay. I would say probably speed, strength. Yeah, it'll be somewhere in there because you are using a bit of a load. It's not totally unloaded. Yeah. And when you play sports, you're unloaded.
Okay, so competition is maximum velocity, probably train a little below that to get warmed up, but not get cooked.
Yeah. You don't want to do things to failure. You want to do things like it's the same. Okay, so think of it this way. Like, did you play football, Jake?
No, I'm playing flag football. I'm in a rec league here in Nashville, but I never played tackle football.
Okay, let's say in football, let's create an obvious context for people. Like you go to soccer practice, right? Now, before you go into like a scrimmage or you do any like whatever the hell it's called, like a simulation or anything like that, or you do specific skill work, you're going to start with like a warm up, right? You're going to do your high knees. Then you're going to maybe do some sprints, and then you get on the speed and agility ladder. Then you'll do some things on the cone, like you'll do your SAQ, right? And then you'll go into your skill work training. So instead of doing that, you can just do this ball work training. So it can replace those things and have a better effect on the body. Now, or you can reduce the amount of SAQ you have to do, and you can add more ball work, or you can do the ball work training and then go into your SAQ and then going into your skill work at your practice. So the ball work is just to get the nervous system and the tissue ready for explosive movement. Like it's going to be the main mechanism you're using it for if you're doing it before a performance. As long as you stay within tempo and ranges that are sustainable, like don't go to failure, don't do like 10 sets of hamstring kickbacks before you have to like do a punt return. You know what I'm saying? Like your hamstrings are going to be fried. Just like how you would never do like a Nordic curl right before you would go like, go into the game. You want to do things that are going to prime the tissue, that's going to push blood and fluid into the tissue. That's going to increase the volume. That's going to increase the elasticity. That's going to increase the recoilability. Everything is based on fluid and neurological activation. So the more you can enhance that, in just the right sweet spot where you're not overdoing it, and then you go into practice, it should work just fine. Just like high knees and speed and agility ladders work just fine for everyday practice. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah. And then when you're training ball work, what type of duration would you consider a set? Is it, do you do time? Do you do reps? And
no, you go for stimulation. You go for Yeah, this
stimulation.
so here's something that's killing athletes is that they're stuck on this fitness paradigm of sets and reps. Like, do you count your reps on a speed and agility ladder? Like how many times your toes went in and out of the ladder?
No,
Do you count your steps when you're doing your high knees?
no, maybe laps, but not really. It's never
Yeah.
reps.
All right. So a lot of these things, because you know what it feels like. Like you're going to do high knees about 20 yards out, because around 20 yards, you start to get a little tired and you can't maintain like that speed. Like it kind of dies down a little bit. Like you would never do high knees 100 fucking yards out, right? It's going to get too slow.
Yeah,
It's going to feel like shit. It's going to be too tired. Your legs are going to burn.
interesting.
Right. So that's sports philosophy. That's a sports rep. Those are sports sets based on how it stimulates the body, and we innately can feel that. But for some reason, when we take yourself off the field and you got to do anything else, that completely goes out the window for people. Where they're like, okay, I did 20 reps. Is that enough? Like I go through this with my clients constantly, where I tell them like, listen, you would never count how many punches you're doing in a combination on the heavy bag. Like you're not doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 10, and then you switch the other arm. Unless you're doing a very specific modality, but usually you just throw an action, boom, 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 and then you move around, and you won't keep punching because it's going to burn, right? And your power is going to drop off, and your neurological drive is going to drop off. You innately know that. Take that idea and apply it to your ball work and sports performance training. This exact same idea. Those are peak repetitions. Trying to do the movement nice and fast. Now, this demonstration, this older version of the ball work, he's doing it really slow. And Dr. Edith was talking about that, where she was doing more slow movements with like 5-pound water bells. Now, I haven't explored that type of methodology. I'm not sure on the benefits. I can't speak on it. But I do know as it's evolved with Marv, it's gotten a lot faster. And the results with the athletes have gotten more noticeable. So under that context, we're doing it at velocity. You want to do these ball work movements as fast as possible. And when you can sense that it's burning, you can feel that, the slow twitch is going to kick in, like your torso starts bracing, your breathing becomes more like you're like, ah, like you're really like tensing up. You're going too far. Just kill the exercise. It's just like plyometrics. You never do plyometrics to failure, right? You only, you do it for like a couple actions, like maybe 5 to 8 plyometric drops, and then that's it. You don't want to do it to exhaustion because it's too hard on the tendons. Same thing with sprinting. Same thing with high knees. Same thing with kicking the soccer ball. Same thing with throwing the baseball. You never throw the baseball to failure. You throw it, and then after a while, like Jake, you're like after like maybe you do like 70 pitches, like okay, I'm done. Like I can feel like I need to stop. I'm running out of gas. Same idea,
Yeah,
same methodology. You go off of stimulation. You don't go off of like how many reps I did. That's a fitness thing. Those ideas are really good for maybe a bilateral training protocol where like one muscle is not working properly compared to the other ones. You got to add extra sets, and it's beneficial to count your reps to understand. Okay, I can do 10. This one I can only do 8. Then the next week, okay, I can do 10 and 10. I'm seeing improvements, right? That's when it's beneficial to count your reps. Or for bodybuilding or powerlifting. Like when it's a huge strength quality, maybe you only want to do a certain number of repetitions, because if you go over that, you start going into the rounds where things start falling apart a little bit. Like where like technique falls apart, compensation kicks in, tissue density starts to break down, you run out of ATP, the chances of injury start to increase.
it's interesting. I before my flag football games, I do a few laps. I tried doing barefoot when my feet are feeling good, but I switch up my movements. I do high knees, and I kind of like to do that Conor McGregor kind of skip, uh, where I don't even know how to describe it, but he kind of kicks out in front with his legs wide. Uh, like the way he struts into the cage, kind of like that, but a skip. A few other ones, but I don't. There's no system. I do it. I do, I don't know, 10, 20 yards, and I switch to the next one, and
All right.
I flow few them. If I feel any tension or anything like that, I'll maybe slow it down for a second and then speed it up. It's all feel. It's It's not a
Yeah, you're not
it's
counting
not
your reps,
Excel
you're not counting your
spreadsheet,
leg.
this many reps. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the thing that's also like, this is like also a byproduct of the CSCS model where they're so rep and set dependent because the tool they use are
Yeah.
dangerous. Like barbells are risky. You got to count and track your steps. And you also got a progressive overload when you can't control the tool very well. With the SuperCat, you have total control of the loading and pressure mechanism pushed onto the athletes. So you don't really need to track that much. You just have to reach the type of stimulation the athlete needs, whether it's whether it's like a 1RM, whether it's an isometric at full capacity. But when you have a barbell, or you got a trap bar, right, and their hands can barely hold it, right, you got to track it. Because if you overload it, if you overload that exerter squat, you're going to fuck their elbows up. So you have all these parameters of tracking, and from bodybuilding, bodybuilders love tracking their sets and reps, which is hilarious because if you look at bodybuilding, they were also one of the first people to start implementing stimulation based exercises over repetition based exercises. Go to failure, right? Who cares how many reps it takes? Go to failure, right? That's the most important thing to squeeze the muscle down for hypertrophy is you got to hit that failure point. So to me it's not necessary to count your reps for the most part. Maybe on plyometrics you want to count some because of how risky they are, like they have that risk factor like the barbell. But generally speaking, if you understand like the training capacity, you understand how many reps you can pump out, where your limits are in neurological drive and fast twitch, because everyone's set is going to look different. Like say we're doing like crossovers, you can have one athlete who's doing crossovers. It could take them maybe 60 seconds to hit their peak set. You have another athlete who hasn't done it very well, or maybe they're younger. It's only going to take them like 30. Everyone's at a different range, and it doesn't really matter what their ranges are as long as they get there. Because on the field, it's the same principle. Like I hope I'm making sense. I'm kind of like trying to break this down, but it can be kind of difficult idea to translate.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's you gotta listen to your body. That's, I mean, ultimately, it's. I think with the CSCS model, you run into this issue where you kind of everyone's at the most basic level. Like the only way to communicate to everyone how much to do is sets and reps. If you start saying
Yeah.
feel this way or feel that way and then stop, you're going to end up with people who are confused. You're going to end up with people who aren't pushing themselves. People are pushing themselves too far. So you kind of end up having to go with like the most objective system, which isn't necessarily the highest quality system, but it's the most scalable for something like CSCS. But
Yeah.
everyone kind of pays the price of that quality. Yeah.
No, you're 100%
If
right.
there's, yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Go. What you're
So
saying?
with the lowest common denominator, you end up with the lowest common denominator. That's the term I was searching for during that.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. That's you really pinpointed the biggest black hole in sports training progression is literally the session model that we're trying to do it under. Where we're trying to do this 30-to-1 athlete to coach strength training model, which is like we just talked to Ivan a couple weeks ago. The Soviets never did it that way. Sports science was never developed under those parameters. It was always a customized system based on the individual, not a general population. Fitness is a general population philosophy. Sports performance is an individual training philosophy. But now we've taken this individual based philosophy and we forced it to become general, and now we're stagnating. We're stagnating on innovation with this. You know, which is
Yeah.
which wouldn't be so bad if I don't know. It wouldn't be so bad if the CSCS community wasn't so defensive to change. That's probably the part that I don't understand. Like I don't know about you, Jake, but I've been coming across that a lot over the years on social media. Is how defensive the CSCS coaches get when you try to implement different ideas, different structures of training sessions, whatever it is. You know, they feel like that this is the way it has to be done. This 30 athlete to one strength coach type model. Maybe because it pays the most, and that's what subconsciously is driving all these coaches, because they all want these, they all want these sweet freaking NCAA jobs. Really, that's like what they're all gunning for.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Harvard degree of certifications. I mean, it's not as hard to get as a Harvard degree, but it has that same sort of prestige where, like gym owners who are trying to scale their gym want to hire CSCS coaches, the the business model favors CSCS coaches. The insurance companies like want
Mm,
all the trainers at the gym to have certifications. The CSCS is the sexiest, most well established certification, so it's the easiest decision for a hiring manager to make. I think it's just like across the board, just whatever the gold standard is, I was thinking about jumping into religion for a sec, but we don't have to go there. But like, whatever the gold standard is, people believe that's like what it should be, and so they if they're under that umbrella, they feel justified and start they lack the creativity to really question where their system fits into the broader scheme.
yeah, and that's also another element to talk about, because you don't want to just like you don't just want to bash the CSCS community, because there's also a lot of great coaches in that community too who do try their very best with what they understand. That element you brought up as a scalable business model is a huge factor that you always have to respect, because here's the truth no one really talks about when it comes to being a performance coach, is that it's hard to make money in this business. Like, this is a hard ass fucking job. Even as a personal trainer, it's difficult. It's like 60% of personal trainers will quit in their first year. I remember reading that stat. I can't remember where it came from. But it blew me away, and I've seen it. I say, out of all the personal trainers I've met over the past like 13 years, uh, I only know two that are still doing it out of maybe like 30 that I've met. Maybe four. Four are still doing it right now, in the past like 10 years. Everyone else quit. They moved on to something else. And in sports performance, it gets even harder, because now the training is more complex. It's more difficult. The problems are more demanding. There's more variables. It's a much more difficult industry than just the fitness industry, and then you gotta pull in clients, you gotta get leads, you gotta have training programs, you gotta have packages. If you're gonna do it on an individual basis like this, you gotta make sure that those 2 hours you're spending working with someone are gonna pay the bills. Not everyone has that kind of budget for training, and it doesn't help that we're in a culture that really devalues, like sports culture really devalues performance training. We look at it as a luxury item more than a necessity. Say, like in the Soviet Union, it was a necessity. It wasn't like a luxury item. But when I was training in people, and that was part of the reason I stopped training people in person, is because it was so hard to make ends meet. It was hard to come up with a price point that was affordable for like the families, they felt comfortable with. Like, I remember charging people like $200 a month for 12 training sessions in a 1 month period. At $200, like the parents were freaking out, and it's like, geez, man, like, don't you understand how expensive the body is? Like, the body is the most expensive thing on the supply and demand market. Like, I don't know if anyone's looked at the price of a medical receipt without insurance, but it's fucking insane to fix and improve the body. Like, there's nothing else higher outside of maybe technology to kill the body, like weapons,
Yeah.
So it's
On
it's
that
just
note too, it
difficult.
kills me that with insurance. Oh, sorry, got a lag. I was just gonna say, the insurance companies only pay for recovery. They pay for massage, they pay for chiropractor, in some cases acupuncture, physical therapy, all this, but they don't consider performance to be like they don't. that's not covered by insurance. It's only covered if you've got an issue. They don't pay for any preventative issues. If you're doing this type of stuff, your injury risk is going to go way down, especially if you're just, you know, someone trying to be healthy, trying to be fit.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's also, I don't know, do you follow a lot of like high school basketball or college recruits and shit like that?
To an extent, I mean the big ones, I pay attention to where they sign and stuff.
So if you focus on like I don't know if Rivals is still a thing. I remember when I was in high school, there's a website called Rivals where they would have like high school athletes that were very top prospects, like listing their stats. It's like a sure dog for like high school athletes. But the most successful athletes, just from my own experience, and if you do your research, you'll start to see this occurring more. The most successful athletes that I ever worked with came from wealthy families. If you look at most of the college prospects and NBA prospects, a lot of them are sons of like coaches, other former players from college or NBA. Like the days of using grit and coming from rags to riches, like how it was like with basketball and football in the 90s, those days are done. It's literally who can afford the most training, who can acquire the most resources. Those are the athletes that are going to rise on top. Like, because this shit's expensive, and my prices were relatively cheap. I had a competitor that was on the other town from me. They were charging, I won't name who they were charging $1,200 a month for 12 sessions. $1,200 a month. This shit is expensive. So if you can't afford it or you don't have the ability to learn and access this knowledge, you're not going to be able to make it to the top echelons of athletics. You just won't. Because and then you got schools and academies that are privatizing these young prospects too. Like you got these soccer high schools, you got these basketball high schools, these football high schools, right? These baseball, like hockey's a big one. They've been doing this forever. Well, they'll literally have kids do less high school and more performance in hockey playing so they become a better prospect for college in the NHL. Like that. Do you know how expensive that shit is? You're talking like $50,000 a year for some of these families. So if you don't have the financial resources to afford it, your chances of becoming pro or high level college are fucking nil. It's not going to happen. That's why you're seeing a lot in, some people call it nepotism, like in pro sports right now. Like if you look, I hate to beat up LeBron some more, but if you look at LeBron's son and LeBron, there's some nepotism going on, but also LeBron's son's not a terrible basketball player. He's actually good. He's just not as good at the highest level right now. Yeah. But if you look at his career, if you watch him, he's been developed and he's had the best trainers, the best coaches, all the resources, good nutrition, because his dad can afford that shit. If you're going to try to play it cheap, if you're not ready to dump resources in there, you're probably going to be mediocre at best. And that's just the reality of where training's at these days. Unless you're a freak. Unless you're like a Zion, who was a freak out of high school doing 360 dunks, weighing 260 pounds when he was fucking 17. He's like, that's super, super, super rare. For the rest of us mortals, we got to do it this way. We got to overstimulate the body to force our genetic structure, our genetic makeup to change. Or like an Adam Archuleta. Pretty average college, busted his ass, redeveloped his body, became NFL status. It took a shit ton of work, and I promise you, it cost him a shit ton of money, but he was making an investment. It's no different than college. Costs about the same amount of money, and that's one thing I would tell some of you parents. Maybe some of you parents are looking about getting your kids in performance training, but you're a little worried about the price. If you invest $500 a month in your kids' performance training, even with a normal CSCS model, that $500, I promise you, will give you a good return on investment if they want to do college sports. Because college one semester can cost $30,000. So maybe you do $500. Let's do a quick calculation. You got your phone near you, Jake?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's calculate $500 times 12.
6,000.
6,000. So you're going to pay $6,000 a year. Say you do that for 2 years. So you invested $12,000 into your kid's athleticism. I promise you, if they're doing performance training and they're super dedicated, that 2 years could give you a 6 to 1 year scholarship in a D2, D1 school, depending on how good they are. That's like going to be $15,000 to $30,000 on its own. That's a good return on investment. And they also have the capability to even get accepted into those type of clubs. So they can eventually work themselves up. Like, people have to think about this. Like, college is a business. College sports is a business. If you want to play college sports and you're not going to reinvest in your business, fuck, you ain't going to make it. Not unless you're born a freak, and that's super, super rare. So that's how people need to look at it. People need to start taking sports performance training seriously, and they got to start. If you want your kid to play college sports, you better be ready to invest in it like you would anything else.
Yeah, who knows too with NIL? It's been scholarships this whole time, but more and more people are getting paid. If you've got a kid now in 10 or 18 years, NIL might be even crazier than it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
One more question on this ball work that I haven't asked yet. For someone who wants to try this but doesn't have the water weights, what are some ways that you can get started? I know a lot of the lower body and the core work doesn't use the water weights.
Mm-hmm.
But is there something you would use in place of the water weights? Can you use a light dumbbell or ankle weights or something like that?
Yeah. With the upper body, I would, taking ankle weights, strapping them around your hands, like around here. So there's like a little bit of slack, 1 to 2 pounds. That's a really good substitute. You can do 2 pound dumbbells, but I don't like the way it feels as much as the ankle weights. I would say invest in the ankle weights for sure. That'll, you can start doing the ball work training. Don't use water bottles. People, stop doing water bottles. Water bottles only loads, in a north to south or east to west direction. These water hand weights is 3-dimensional, so don't use water bottles. Use ankle weights. If you want to purchase a set of hand weights, you can go to my Instagram, click the link. You can buy a set, a pair. They come in a pair. Some people think I'm just selling one at a time. No, it's a pair, people. Come on. I'm not sick like that. You can buy a pair for $69, fill them with water. Dude, absolute game changer. Even if you're not wanting to do all the ball work, if you want to do anything like rotator, fast twitch, like a lot of stuff, the body blade. Jake, you ever use like the body blade and shit? It looks like a handle with the C
Yeah, I
on it.
like that thing.
Yeah, you can do literally, and but the thing about the body blade is really long, and you can't hold it certain directions, or it's gonna fucking smack your face. So you're very limited on the angles that you can work with the water hand weight. You get the exact same stimulus, but now you can work it here. I can work it here. I can work it here to the side of my head, down here. And I don't have to worry about this long thing freaking whipping me around. So it's a much more versatile tool just using water, and it's probably, honestly, if you want a fast return on investment, this ball work training, the slant board, the hand weights, stability ball, the balance pipes, it'll cost you maybe about $150 to get everything. Dude, $150, some consistency. This will change your body forever, if you do the modalities right.
Yeah, I can say that it's easy to get into. You can make the slant board. You can make the balance pipes out of stuff that you can buy from Home Depot for even cheaper too. So I would say you could easily get started for under $100 if you're willing to put a little elbow grease into it.
Yeah. But I do got to come to a hard stop up here, Jake.
All right, Quintin. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone who's been following along. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. That helps us a lot. And we'll be back with more content. Appreciate y'all.
All right.